Let me introduce today's special guest. I think it's probably safe to say that most of us have at some point thought somewhere along these lines. In an age of globalization where the internet and other forms of electronic communication have made it possible to work from almost anywhere, it matters much less where we choose to live. That makes a lot of sense. Bring your laptop, or in my case, a BlackBerry, to the cottage, chalet, or while you're vacationing. You can work from just about anywhere. Our guest today wouldn't argue that the ability to work remotely makes it possible to live almost anywhere. He would just argue that today, more than ever, it doesn't make sense to live just anywhere. Richard Florida is a professor of business and creativity and the director of the Martin Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. You may well have heard of his international bestseller, The Rise of the Creative Class, which introduces the notion of a class of people, scientists, engineers, architects, and educators, writers, artists, and entertainers, whose economic function is to create new ideas, new technology, and new creative content. He pursued that concept with his follow-up, The Flight of the Creative Class. He's here today because he's written yet another compelling and thought-provoking book, this one about where we live rather than how we live. It's called Who's Your City? How the Creative Economy is Making Where You Live the Most Important Decision in Your Life. Where we live, according to Professor Florida, determines the jobs we have access to, the careers that result, the people we can meet, and the different types of social and cultural situations we encounter. The book divides our planet into 40 different mega-regions and explores the ways in which they have become economic and cultural engines in the world. It examines the personalities they possess and reasons certain types of people choose to live in them, while others look elsewhere. And finally, it provides the reader with tools for finding our ideal city, rating the best place to live for singles, families, and empty nesters. I don't want to give any more than that away, but what I do want to say, finally, before I ask Richard to come up, is that Richard has moved to Toronto. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our podium today the author of Who's Your City? How the Creative Economy is Making Where You Live the Most Important Decision in Your Life, Professor Richard Florida.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. And Alan and I are neighbors at the Mars Building. And thanks to our sponsors, thanks to the Canadian Club, special thanks to our team at the Martin Prosperity Institute, my wife Rana, who runs the Creative Class Group, and the incredible folks at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto. I want to talk about my new book, Who's Your City? It's my first talk about it ever. And I wrote this book with a specific mission in mind. 40 to 50 million of us, depending on how we parse the numbers, in North America, 40 to 50 million of us move each and every year. 15 to 20 million of us, think about that. That's a big number in North America. 15 to 20 million of us move to a new county or a new state or province or to a new country. Now, when I was growing up, my dad, and I talk about my dad in this book, I talk about him in Rise of the Creative Class. My dad had an 8th grade education. He went to work in a factory in Newark, New Jersey. He told me, Rich, you got to study hard. You've got to have to go to university and get a graduate degree, and you have to pick a career. And my dad, he first told me to be a doctor, and he didn't win that argument. Then he said you should be a dentist, and he didn't win that argument. Then he said, oh, you like to talk a lot, so you should be a lawyer. I decided I wasn't good at punching a clock, and I grew up during the 60s and 70s. Academia was for me. My mom was a really, really, really smart person. And my mom said something to me even more profound. She said, Richard, your dad only had an 8th grade education. He worked in a factory all of his life. My mom came from a little bit better means. She had a high school degree. Many of her friends went off to college. She said, I probably could have married a different guy. could have been a doctor or a lawyer, but the best decision I ever made, Rich, was I married your father. And I was madly in love with him each and every day of our life together. So she said, and psychologists agree, probably the most important decision they say you'll make is who you pick for your life partner, who you pick for your significant other. If you do that right and you have a family, that's going to bring you great joy and happiness. And then I read this incredible book by a psychologist at Harvard. His name is Dan Gilbert. It's called Stumbling on Happiness. And he said there's 3 important decisions each of us make in our lives. What we do, who we choose to live with, and where we live. The whole book deals with the first 2. And I went back, after being a professor now of urban planning and economic geography, management, and public policy, I went back and I took a look. And, you know, the shelves are filled with books giving you advice on what to do with your job and your career. And, you know, your parents talk to you about it, your relatives talk to you about it, your guidance counselor talks to you about it. And then I thought about, you know, the other one, relationships. Boy, oh boy, there's psychologists who talk about the role of a relationship. And there's advice, and there's Dear Abby and Ann Landers. This column written by 4 women in Detroit called the Motown Lowdown. My wife's actually one of the authors of that, which is kind of a contemporary take on this thing. And no one had ever written a book about why the place we choose to live is important. And if you think about it for more than a millisecond, increasingly the jobs and careers we take on, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, are specialized in certain places. You know, if you want to do investment banking, you're in New York or London or Toronto or Hong Kong. If you want to play music, it's Nashville and maybe Montreal. If you want to do indie music. If you want to do film, it's LA and a few other places. Increasingly our jobs are specialized. And then if you want to meet someone, increasingly the best places to meet that person of your dreams and then raise your family are going to depend on where you choose to live. Well, I went back and looked, and no one had ever written a book. So if my other books have been for thought leaders and economic developers and mayors and ministers and premiers, I hope this book finds its audience with them. But it's for each and every single one of you. And I know this book, you know, it doesn't really matter how much it sells. It will be successful if it makes the place we live and the choice of where to live part of this 3 things that we think about. If it makes it part of the conversation, what we do for a living, who we pick for our life partner, and where we live. Well, Alan mentioned there's a lot of smart people in the world who've gotten real captivated by globalization. The economic activity is decentralizing, they say. Companies are moving their operations overseas. They're offshoring. They're outsourcing. They're moving to India and China and other low-wage locations. This is an old argument. It's not a new argument. You know, first it was going to be the railroad and the telegraph that was going to free us from living in cities and places. Oh, and then it was going to be the automobile and the telephone. And then it was the airplane and the wireless and now the internet. And that was going to make place so much less important. The world, according to one writer, Tom Friedman, is flat. Place doesn't matter anymore. He says there's 6 billion people and we can all plug and play from wherever we want to live, and we can all compete from multiple locations. Well, we took a look at this. And working with our team at the Prosperity Institute, we actually took a look at where people live and where economic activity goes on. You know, this past year, for the first time in human history, more than 50% of us live in urban areas. The first time in human history. Now, we did something really clever, and I won't bore you with the statistics, but you can go visit our website, who'syourcity.com, and you can go take a look at the statistics and maps in the book. But if we took a picture of the world at night, we used those satellite images, and we used that to distill where centers of economic activity are and where innovation actually occurs. There are 191 countries in the world. 191 according to the United Nations. But if you look at how the world is organized, it's actually organized in what we call 40 mega-regions. Now, they're not just cities like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver or New York or London. They're bigger than that. They're these large mega-regions. The one that stretches here from Toronto out to Waterloo, back east to Ottawa, actually touches a bit in Montreal, goes down to Buffalo and Rochester. 22 million people, 500 billion in economic output. And then the other one around Vancouver that stretches, we call it Cascadia, it stretches down from Vancouver into Seattle, out to Portland, 9 million people, 260 billion in economic activity. New York, Washington, and Boston. Southern California, Northern California. Greater London, one we call we have lots of funny names, Ambrustwerp. Those 40 places, which account for less than 19% of the world's population, produce 2/3 of all economic output and 9 in 10 of all of our technological innovations. You see, the world isn't flat at all. At the same time that the world is decentralizing and new players are coming into the mix, our economic activity is actually concentrating. And just think about this. When people tell you we're competing against India or China, sometimes they call it the BRICS. It's a funny acronym, the BRICS nations. Brazil, Russia, India, and China. When you really take a look at it, we're not competing with those countries at all. We're competing a mega region in India that runs from Bangalore to Mumbai. Another one in China that runs from Beijing to Shanghai. As one of my Chinese students, when we were studying this subject, said to me, and I talk about this conversation in the book, he said, Rich, if you think the world is uneven and concentrated and spiky in North America, take a look at my country, China. He said, people in Shanghai, like himself, a young man, he has a consulting business, he said, I live as well or better than you. But the people on the outskirts of Shanghai live in pre-civilized conditions. The world isn't becoming flatter. The great puzzle or paradox of our time is as globalization occurs, economic activity and technological activity are becoming more concentrated. It's actually something I worry about a great deal. It is producing political polarization and a culture war in my country, the United States. It's causing great turmoil in the Middle East. It's causing great conflict in China. It's causing all sorts of problems in the European community. But the point of fact, if this world is not only flat but spiky, how does it matter for each of us? How does it matter to us as we navigate our lives? Well, the book says we make 3 big decisions in our life. 3 big location decisions. We choose places to live, most of us, 3 times. The first and biggest one is when we graduate college. In fact, you guys out there who are in school and in high school and in college, this is critical. Increasingly, where you choose to live after college is going to be as important, if not more important to your life than where you choose to go to college. I only wish somebody would have told me that. That's the first one because it sets your career. It puts you in the job networks, and those job networks are becoming incredibly specialized in order to do work in many fields. And we talk about this, and we have a map of those in the book. In order to do work in many fields, you have to be in particular job markets. It's not only about the job market. If you want to meet that special someone, we talk about how there are different ratios. Actually, we had an article in the Boston Globe on Sunday about the best places for single guys to meet single women and the best places for single women to meet single men. And the ratios are different. We call this a mating market. It's our kind of funny phrase. Well, think about it. Your job's important, but who you meet and marry is as important, if not most important, to most of us. The second big decision you're going to make comes not when you get married, but when you have kids. And when you have kids, your priorities change. And we talk about it, and we rate and rank in the book, and we're doing more of this. When you have kids, your priorities change. And most people think, well, I have to make a move. And what the book says is, don't just move to the nearest, closest by, bigger house or suburb or neighborhood. Take a good, hard look. Consider your options. Think about all those places and consider all they have to offer. And finally, the third big move you make is when the kids get out of college, go to college, and leave home. And you know, when we were talking about marketing this book and how we're going to roll it out, and people said, it's a great book for college kids and it's a great book for college seniors. I have a different hope for this book. My hope is that every young person going to college or graduating college buys the book and gives it to mom and dad and says, Mom and Dad, now it's your time to think about where you really want to live, and this book has something for you. Well, it's not just about economics. One of the great things I've learned in writing this book is there's another dimension to our life that place really bears on. It's our psychology. Psychologists for a long time have written about our personal happiness, our positive psychology, our subjective well-being. And they've told us all the great things that being in a fulfilling job and career and being in a wonderful marriage and having kids and being close to family and friends can bring. We took a good look at this. We worked with the Gallup organization. We surveyed 28,000 people. And we asked these people two kinds of questions. We said, what are the things that truly make you happy in your life? And we included all the other questions, but we added questions about places and communities. And then we said, in addition to that, what are the things that make you really, really, really thrilled? What are the key things in the place you live? Well, on the first question, what are the things that make you happy? We confirmed some things people already know, and we learned a few new ones. The first thing we learned is that family and friends and personal relationships are the number one factor. It's not money that matters to your life happiness. Money can't buy you happiness. It's what you do and how thrilled you are by it, and how excited you are, how much challenge you feel in your work life. Does it allow you to self-express and be the person you want to be? But that third factor is place, and no one had ever looked at this before. As important as the other two to your personal, and think about this. Just think about this for a minute. If you're in a job you don't like, and you're not excited by what you do, and you're getting bored, boy, you can see your mood swing, and you can see how you're not being happy. But when you're in a job you like and it excites you, boy, oh boy, that charges you, it gives you energy. Same thing in a relationship. Right? If you're dating someone and the relationship has run out of steam and it's not going well, boy, oh boy, and things are hard, it drags you down, it gets you depressed. But if that relationship is hitting on all cylinders, family life is fantastic, it gives you great joy. The same thing happens with place. If we move to a place and it doesn't fit us, if we don't feel comfortable there, if we can't be ourselves there, if we have to be some other kind of person, if we can't do our thing, whether that's running or cycling or walking in the park or pushing a stroller, taking our dog, whatever it is, if we can't do our thing in our place, if it doesn't fit us, and we interviewed so many people who talk about this. Now, all the thought you put into your job, the studies you do, the interviews you go through, the weighing of the pros and cons, well, think about picking a life partner. Think about picking someone to marry. Would you just, but when it comes to place, we just go. Would you go to like a dating site like Match.com and find a person and say, oh, I want to marry them? No, you go out on dates and you spend time and you build that relationship. Place is as important. How much thought have you given to it? How much have you told your kids or your grandkids? Well, you not only have to think about your jobs and your significant other, what about place? Place, it turns out, is at least important as the other two to our happiness. And get this, when our jobs and careers give us stress, when our personal lives bring us down, only 3% of the people, 28,000 people who responded to the survey, say that the place they live is a source of extreme stress in their life. If we get our place right, it can balance out those other factors. And then we dug into what is it about our place? What is it about our place that really matters? And I want to tell you two things. The first thing that psychologists will tell you is that we have 5 different kinds of personalities. There are agreeable people. There are conscientious people. We work hard. We're dutiful. We do our job well. There are extroverts, people who get a lot of charge and energy from being around other people. There are neurotic people. Yes, there are. And there are open to experience people. And when we built the maps of where personalities locate, something struck us. Personality types cluster together. Agreeable people cluster in regions with agreeable people. Extroverts cluster around other extroverts, and I'll tell you, are drawn to those sales jobs. The people who are most likely to migrate, the people who look like pinpoints on the map, from New York to Boston to Washington to Toronto to Vancouver to Seattle and San Francisco, are a group of people called open to experience. They don't take a charge. They're not like extroverts. They don't take a charge from meeting other people. They take a charge from new experiences. They're the kind of people who innovate and create new companies. They're the kind of people who create new art. They're the kind of people who are a little bit aloof, a little bit strange, a little bit quirky. They like to self-express a lot. Sometimes they look a little different. They're disagreeable. They're highly introverted. Well, what happens is somehow these open to experience people are finding, not in a planned way, in an almost random way, finding each other, becoming together. And then the last thing we found. You see, I've had a lot of people who wanted to engage in a debate about cities and communities. And they wanted to make either-or debates. Oh, Florida thinks it's all about making a city that's a nice place to live with great trees and great restaurants and a place that's open for young people or artists or the gay and lesbian community. Oh, he wants to draw a line. He thinks cities are better than suburbs. He thinks it's all about making a city that's fun, but he doesn't worry about crime and education. Well, we took a hard look. 28,000 people. We asked every question. How safe is your town? How good is the schools? What are the parks like? What is recreation like? Is your town an open-minded place that welcomes people from the poor, low-income people, gay and lesbian people, young people, entrepreneurs? This either-or thinking doesn't cut it at all, and it is a huge mistake. It's not about rural versus suburban versus urban. It's not a trade-off between a crime rate and good schools and a great place to live with a wonderful outdoors and an open-minded. The best places do it all. And when it all boils down to it, when we looked at this, there are 5 key factors that when you get them right will increase your happiness, improve your life, and really, really make the place you live an important part of who you are. The first one is a no-brainer. You got to feel safe and secure there. You got to have a low crime rate. You got to have good schools. No-brainer. Absolutely essential. Number 2 is the place you live has to offer fantastic opportunity. Not just jobs, but the kind of jobs that we want to do. You have to be in a place that offers the kind of job and career options that matter to you. You got to have great leadership. Political leadership is part of it. You got to be in a place that has civic leadership and business leadership, and actually the places people are happiest with are places that we feel we can plug in and play a role. And then there are 2 factors that quite surprise me, even as an expert in this field. Quite surprise me, and I think are new and original, and I think hopefully will contribute to moving this dialogue further, and I think will resonate with many of you, especially those of us who are a little bit younger. Just as important as a low crime rate and good schools is how open a community is to its people and how much it allows them to self-express. This isn't my value judgment. This is the results of a survey of 28,000 people, all occupation groups, all income groups, all education levels, all races and ethnicities. We asked these people, how good of a place is your town for? These are rural towns, urban centers, suburbs. Old people, young people, straight people, gay and lesbian people, artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, families with children, disabled people, and all across the board. Ethnic minorities, religious minorities. In those communities where the majority of people reported, my town is a good place for all of those, the happiness and well-being of every group rose. And by the way, there were 2 groups at the bottom of the list. And I just want you to keep this in mind. I don't want to go into it. The book goes into it. People reported in their town was the least open. It was not a good place. The lowest group was the poor. I don't like it, but it's understandable. You know what second from the bottom was? It wasn't the gay and lesbian community. It wasn't ethnic minorities, racial minorities, religious minorities. It was young, recent college graduates looking for a job. And just consider that. And then the final factor, the factor that these 28,000 people said is the single most important thing that gives them joy and happiness in their community. We call it quality of place. How does the place treat its natural environment? How clean is the water? How much are people investing in their waterfront? How lush is the tree canopy? How are the parks? Can you recreate there? Can you do your thing? What is the open space like? What is the premium the community places on its history? Does it preserve that history? Does it invest in its architecture? Sometimes amongst us, we call this an aesthetic factor. Now, many people say that's baloney. It's not aesthetics in a community that matter. It's the services. It's the infrastructure. It's the pipes. It's the police. It's the fire department. All of human history, we have been trying to make our homes, where we live, and the places we live more beautiful. It is a no-brainer. And when a community has this aesthetic premium, when it has quality of place, it's not just the rich that benefit. The interesting thing is that people at all levels of the class structure, poor, racial minorities, everyone benefits and finds, you know what? In a sense, when a city has this going for it, it brings up everyone's energy level. Anyway, I'm looking at my watch here. I see it's already pushing time. I want to thank you for your patience. I hope you get a chance to read the book, and I look forward to your questions.
So, Richard, we do have a few questions for you. I've got a live mic here, and the first is, I think it's a good one. Why Toronto? Why did you choose to live in Toronto?
Now, for everyone out there in viewing land, as soon as I say something positive, I can tell you tomorrow in the paper it's going to be Florida was trying to suck up to all those people at the Canadian Club. So with that in mind, all our friends in the media, for three reasons. One is the remarkable opportunity to build the Prosperity Institute at the Rotman School of Management, with all due respect to every other great business school in this country, in this province, in this city, is the most innovative academic institution in the world, led by the best dean in the world, Roger Martin, and to do it with folks like Jeff Beattie. That opportunity does not come along usually at any time in anyone's life. We're so fortunate it came along in our case. Number two, it was to move to Toronto, a city I love. Part of this book, I had actually made a little spreadsheet, a rudimentary spreadsheet out of pen and paper several years ago. People who know me know what that means. When I was thinking about moving from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. This book is a rumination partly on that process of our own relocations, Ron and I, from Washington to Pittsburgh to Washington, Pittsburgh and Detroit to Washington, and ultimately to Toronto. Washington and Toronto topped the list then. And so Toronto's been on my radar screen and on our radar screen for a while. What a great city. What a fabulous city. On every dimension, it reflects this work. It reflects the work I do. And it's a place we've wanted to be. It's also very close to Rana's family who visit from the Detroit area, and we go back and forth a lot. And the third reason was to live in Canada. And there are two reasons for that. One, I felt that my work was too American-centric. And this book is a first pass. We're going to be doing a Canadian edition, and we're going to be doing a world edition. And at the Institute, we're going to be building better data sets, and we're going to be more global. And secondly, and I don't want to go too far, I believe in peace. That's all I'm going to say. And with your track record on those questions, it was just a very, very appealing place at the city level and at the country level.
Might build on that. How do you reconcile Canadian versus U.S. cultural differences in producing North American statistics and observations?
I could ask my wife to answer that, but I won't, Ron. I won't put you on the spot. We've learned a lot. You know, and you think, we had a nice table the other night. There was an Australian fellow there living here, a Canadian who was living in the States, and us, and you think, Americans living in Canada. And you think, oh, my God, they're just the same place, right? They're just all the same. We all speak the same language. We all seem sort of similar. I think the most important thing we've learned is how to be less aggressive. Does everyone get this? Like, lay off the horn, don't argue as much. And it's really, I think those cultural things, and Jeff taught me something when I first came here that I think is really, really fantastic. And I was saying, we have support here, Jeff. It's really great. I never had support before. And he said, Jeff, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. He said, sometimes in the United States, they think of a leader as the individual who gets things done. We call it, kick A. This expression, the individual has to carry the day. And maybe it's much more important to have the leader reflect the community. And I think those are the things we're learning, and we're still learning. But one thing I want to say, it's going to take us a long time. People are always asking, what do we recommend? Not only me, but our colleagues at the Institute for Toronto and Ontario and Canada. Boy, oh boy, we're just getting our feet wet. It's going to take us a while to really think that through. But it's been an ongoing learning experience, and we hope to be able to learn a lot more.
Does the size of the hinterland affect the success of the megapolis?
Size matters. It really does. Sorry, had to get that out. Big places have real advantages. So we're fortunate here in this region to be in the 5th largest mega region in North America, the 12th largest in the world. And that's because markets are bigger. Talent sheds, labor supplies are bigger. More people gravitate. And if you're open with regard to immigration, boy, oh boy, you have an edge. That said, the hinterland matters a lot. And making sure, and I think one of the big questions, and where I think there's been real problem in the United States, is the disconnect between the thriving cores of Greater Boston, New York City, San Francisco, L.A., Washington, D.C., and the fading hinterlands. And one of the things I caution everyone here is pay attention to this now, before the fear and anger and insecurity of those peripheral areas. If you're a person like my dad, my dad was living in a peripheral area in the United States. If you're toiling in a manufacturing job or a service industry job, if you're not in high tech, living or in arts or entertainment, living in a thriving city center, boy, oh boy, the future doesn't look good for you. And I think making sure that we can keep everybody cohesive and maintain social cohesion in the core, in the center, and in the hinterland is a really important point going forward. And I actually believe that Canada, along with several of the Scandinavian countries and perhaps Australia and New Zealand, have something very important to show the world there.
Richard, thank you for taking those questions. I'm going to call on my colleague John Capobianco to more formally thank you. Thank you for taking the questions.
Professor Florida. It is my great pleasure to have the opportunity to thank Professor Richard Florida for a fascinating and thought-provoking speech and talk that I believe has changed the way many of us think about cities and places that we live. Jane Jacobs, who was cited in the reviews of Who's Your City, once said this about cities, and I quote, "To approach a city as if it were an architectural problem is to make the mistake of attempting to substitute art for life. The results are neither life nor art. They are taxidermy." Unquote. Jane Jacobs understood cities, and clearly so does Richard Florida. He comprehends their importance, their influence, and the basic foundation they provide to the lives we lead. Having listened to Professor Florida, Who's Your City has suddenly found itself atop my list of what to read next. Sir, thank you very much, and on behalf of all of us, all the best. Thank you.
That wraps up our program for this afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe afternoon. Rogers will run this throughout the days to come.